The ultimatum arrived before the hull warmed. Admiral Maracade stood on the flag bridge of the battleship Sanction and watched the message bloom across every pane. The mandate of Harrow framed their demand in lacquered language and a clock that did not blink. Ultimatum 0020 counted down along the bottom edge of the tactical plot, bright as a wound. 12 blockade cruisers held the convoy by the throat at Kuiper Gate. Echo, their beams angled in their silence theatrical. The air tasted faintly of ion and cold metal. Signal integrity, she asked, voice-level eyes on the vector overlays. Authentic, said Quorum, the fleet mind, its tone clipped but not unkind. Mandate Praetor Vesk uses a ceremonial cipher. The countdown is synchronized against their fire control lattice. Ultimatum 00-1931. XO. Orel Vance shifted beside her boots, humming with the deck's subsonics. Their doctrine says we declare surrender, or they erase the convoy, Admiral. They left a corridor open, but it is a kill funnel. All cameras on. He nodded toward the civilian screens already gathering faces. Put the convoy on, Mara said. The Sanction's forward screens flicked to a gallery freighter, wards the ambulance ship, Larkspur, 13 grain haulers, and the refugee barge, Lantern of Gray. She felt the bridge air change as the crew inhaled together. Somewhere aft, a coolant pump caught and hissed. We do not argue with a gun. We show the bullet's cost. She walked the line of stations, fingers grazing the seatbacks like a silent blessing. Quorum map their lattice returns. Imani. I want deceptive glows seeded into their scopes. Tomas thread the convoy tether behind us. We are not giving them a corridor, we are giving them a syllabus. Acknowledged, said Quorum. The AI's avatar did not appear. It never did on the bridge. Its presence was the gentle correction of a heading. The gain curve on a sensor, the restraint on a trigger. Ultimatum 00-1842. They are transmitting their standard civics, Neil be catalogued, be taxed, be protected. We'll answer, Mara said, mouth dry. But first we teach. Before the first set piece, the crew's voices flickered on the internal net, in quick human fragments. A deckhand named Pilar whispered she would send a ping to her brother once they cleared. A tech named Ihsan tucked a ribbon into his sleeve so his daughter could find it later. The Larkspur's chief medic counted bandage packs, then performed a ritual of breath and touch on his own hands. The Lantern of Gray baked bread, because that calmed the children, though the ovens stole power. The grain hauler Bellwether set a tiny camera to face a cradle because the baby slept best to the engine thrum. A pilot on Skiff 7 kissed a keychain with cat ears and laughed at herself for it. A prayer drifted up from a freight chapel, unmarked and gentle. Open your hand without dropping the weight. Praetor Vesk has repeated the terms, Quorum said, smoothing data across the board. Ultimatum 00-1759. Surrender now. Transit the provided lane. Non-compliance will be answered with erasure for moral clarity. Mara zoomed the mandate's geometry until its bones showed. 12 cruisers formed a ring with a deliberate weak seam at 2 o'clock, their fire arcs presented like gifts. The seam was a lie. The convergence angles would cut the convoy into thin sorrow if they entered. Imani, she said softly, seed reflectors and ghosts along the seam. Give them returns we do not own. EW Officer Imani Reeves's hands moved with a pianist's speed, launching lattice drones disguised as de-iced ore crates, spoofed emission lines, coded to bloom bright when painted by hostile rangefinders. The Sanction vibrated as a launch rack cycled. On the tactical overlay, a faint mist drifted outward and took on geometry. The lattice returns what it is given. Praetor Vesk is opening a wideband educational channel, Quorum noted. He is explaining that an ultimatum purifies decision trees, Admiral. He is saying ambiguity kills more than lasers. Ultimatum 00-1704. Then we'll let him educate himself, Vance said, a low growl under his breath. Mara's gaze slid over to the coolant haze rolling along a distant ceiling pipe as systems took the strain. Transmit to all mandate ships, she said. Sanction fleet acknowledges receipt. We will not enter your funnel. We will escort civilians on a vector that ensures proportional transparency. Our sensors are live. So are yours. The mandate did not answer with words. They answered with tiny corrections in their ring, a shifting of range gates, a quiet hunger in their posture. On the lantern of gray, a child pressed a palm against a porthole, breath fogging the glass. Count the breaths you save, then move your feet. Ultimatum 01612, Quorum said. They expect a plea within the next 60 seconds, as per recorded custom. Imani light their seam with our decoys, Mara said. Tomas aligned convoy behind Sanction's Eclipse profile. We take their sight with ours. Thomas Hale said, voice tight and bright. He adjusted thrust vectors until the convoy, tucked into the shadow geometry Sanction, projected a long skewed silhouette that made the fleet look oddly elongated on enemy scopes. On the bridge, the air smelled faintly of warmed insulation and coffee gone cold. Vesk is cycling his rhetoric, Quorum observed. He is invoking the word order as a balm. Ultimatum. 1537. Patch him, Mara said. The praetor's face appeared in a corner tile lit from below, eyes heavy with certainty. You were offered a corridor, he said, voice patient. Our database shows your convoy will lose 31% fewer lives if you comply. This is a merciful function. Decline, and we align the remainder. We do not accept math that presumes your trigger. Mara said, polite as a scalpel. You are seen. Your beams are mapped. Your costs will be counted publicly. The account will not be closed in secret. Vesk's eyes flickered to some unseen aid. You leverage shame like a weapon. We prefer mirrors, she said. Imani now. A dozen drones awoke along the false seam and flashed a bright signature back along mandate rangefinders. For a heartbeat, their instruments saw their own beams come home. Lenses recalibrated, then labored, then corrected again. The mandate ring flexed. Mandate Cruiser 9 has locked the wrong tone, Quorum reported, smooth even in alarm. They believe our decoy is a tug with children aboard. Hold our fire, Mara said, jaw set. Let them tell on themselves. On civilian channels, a bakery oven clicked off to spare power for a medbay. A child asked if the stars were angry, and a tired voice said, the stars did not know anger, only gravity and light. A cargo dog barked at an empty crate that was not empty. Inside, someone's last antique book hummed softly with a long-forgotten RFID tag. Teach without humiliation. Humiliate only if necessary. Ultimatum 001410. Quorum said, Cruiser 9 is spooling coils. Their first shot will glance our forward veil if they fire at all. Heat margin at 8%. Brace the forward veil, Mara said. Vance, flood it with cold if they twitch. They twitched, Vance said, and the shot came, a clean line of disciplined light that touched the decoy, returned a smear of noise, and then slid across Sanction's outer veil like a scalpel across a callus. The hull sang once low and offended. On the Larkspur, medtechs swore as readouts spiked and then settled. Minor blistering along segment C, Quorum said. One rating burned at the knuckle by a control panel flash. He is laughing and crying at once. Name, Mara asked. Gao, Quorum said, as if names were talismans. He says, tell his mother he ducked in time. Hold without closing your fist. Transmit, Mara said, voice steady. Mandate Cruiser 9 has discharged a weapon at a convoy under ultimatum with cameras live. The public tally increments under your flag. We will not return the fault to the wrong ledger. Imani's console bathed her in pale light. They are adjusting. Their lattice is smart but proud. If we push, they will flood the seam. We don't push, Mara said. We lean. Her hand traced a shallow arc on the plot. Quorum rotate our silhouette just enough that their corridor narrows by their own fire rules. Tomas keep the convoy tucked in. Imani let the next decoy drift lazy and obvious. Ultimatum 001305 pulsed in the corner of every mind. They measured us as targets. We measure them as neighbors. The second shot never came. Instead, the mandate widened the corridor, embarrassed into apparent generosity. The ring breathed out. The pressure shifted. He is attempting to restore his narrative, Quorum murmured. He speaks of benevolence. Record his every syllable, Mara said. When we publish whole. The sanction's hull creaked a small, settling sound, like a ship remembering its age. Somewhere close, a vent bled a sliver of ozone into the bridge air. Mara thought of the lantern of gray and the warm loaf the children would be given when the lights steadied. Convoy ready, Tomas said. On your mark. Not yet, she said. He will shorten the clock when we refuse his lane. That is his second move. When he does, we pivot. Everyone breathe. Counting is easy when lives are numbers, harder when they are faces. The praetor's voice returned calm and almost kind. Ultimatum revised, he said. For your indecision, the interval is reduced. Ultimatum 000800. A ripple of anger moved through Sanction's crew like heat. Vance swore under his breath, then stopped and steadied his stance. Imani's shoulders tightened. Tomas touched the helm with a lover's care. Thank you, Mara said to the screen. We accept your confession of arbitrariness. Her voice stayed soft. All ships execute drift lesson. Quorum call the shape. Drift lesson. Quorum said, and the map filled with thin gliding curves. We underthrust by 2% and let their own aim compensation pull the corridor inside out. Lattice drones brighten, then extinguish on a stagger to create a false recession. Convoy crosses between their mutual fire arcs while their rules prohibit discharge near a perceived civilian cluster. The corridor turns when you rest your weight on the truth. From the convoy net came a quiet applause, not for bravado, but for legibility. On the lantern of gray, the bread came out uneven, but loved. On the larkspur, a child with a broken arm was told a story about gentle giants. Begin the drift, Mara said. Thrusters whispered. The bridge lights softly dimmed to spare power for EW. The hull's low voice became a purr as vectors aligned. The mandate ring shifted to compensate the numbers on their side, certain the history of their certainty long. Praetor Vesk is watching metrics, Quorum said. His eyes move when our decoys brighten. Ultimatum 000658. He thinks we are pleading by stealth, Vance said. He thinks we are clever but contrite. We are neither, Mara said. Balance is not apathy, it is choice made visible. Cruiser 3 twitched. Their range gates overlapped with Cruiser 4's in a space that had contained nothing for the last minute. Then it contained a human silhouette, made from drones, heat blooming like a held breath, and both cruisers tilted their arcs away a fraction as their own rules demanded. The open lane narrowed further, not by our hand, but by their doctrine. Lantern of gray move, Mara said. Larkspur follow her wake. Bellwether cut your ovens and ride that shadow. Lantern moving a voice replied soft and shaking. We see the way. On the bridge, the smell of hot plastic sharpened as a harmless relay ran a little too warm. Someone cracked a chemical cold pack with a snap and hiss. The public tally grows quiet when beams stay holstered. Vesk leaned forward in his tile. You have imposed your weakness on our mercy, he said. This is theft of clarity. Ultimatum 0540. Mara tilted her head. Your words are heavy with certainty, she said. Do you ever audit what your certainty costs? He blinked once slow. We do not bargain with law. Neither do we, she said. The convoy slid through a space that did not exist an hour ago, and would not exist again in quite this way. Quorum whispered ranges and velocities, and Tomas kept them all inside a cradle of math that was merciful without permission. Imani let a single decoy fail and fall to heat, so the mandate would feel a satisfaction that came with a lesson attached. Hold steady, let them overcorrect themselves. A mandate picket frigate arrived on the dark side of the gate, with quiet elegance bringing a plan-changing escalation like a cold drink knocked from a hand. New contact, Quorum said. Stealth frame with forward scatter minimized. They are designed to burn ghosts from the board. Ultimatum, show 00450. Imani exhaled. They will sniff our lattice. They will know we lied. Then we tell the truth louder, Mara said. Quorum square their arrival with their published doctrine. Vance opened the forward lens. The lens on Sanction's nose irised wide. For a long breath, the universe poured in unfiltered. The hull vibrated like a bowstring. The forward camera captured the frigate's signature and rebroadcast it on every civilian frequency, stamped with mandate-to-mandate authentication. The reckoning is public. The excuses are not. Praetor Vesk Mara said your stealth frigate has entered a civilian ultimatum ring to erase deception tools rather than adjust your own claims. We show our hand decoys. You show yours denial layered on force. All eyes are on you. There was a small silence in which even the engine hum felt like it listened. On the Larkspur, the medic with the ritual of breath pressed his hands to his forearms, again slower this time. On the Lantern, a child said the stars tasted like flour today. Ultimatum 0402, Quorum said. Vesk's pupils contracted. He is angry in a practiced way. Vance leaned nearer. They will cut one of ours to prove their limb is sound. They can try, Mara said. Imani ready mirror lesson. We already used lattice glow, Imani said. Different approach, different form, Mara replied. We will not reflect their beam back. We will reflect their logic. Quorum mark Cruiser 9 as the one that fired. When the frigate sweeps our decoys, let its interference drag 9's range gates across the open lane. Then ask their doctrine whether a beam can pass there. Anchor your case in the rules they wrote, Set Quorum said. Ultimatum 000310. The frigate has powered the sweep. We cannot stop it, but we can time it. Time it, Mara said. The sweep rolled forward like a glass knife. Drones died quietly, their last act to sing the right song at the right moment. Cruiser 9's aim gates shivered under the interference and settled very slightly wrong. The open lane blinked from safe to red on mandate instruments for a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, mandate policy forbade discharge into a space they had designated safe for 5 consecutive minutes. They have trapped themselves, Vance breathed. They have taught themselves, Mara corrected. No hand needs to close when the map speaks. Praetor Mara said gentler than before. You may now release the convoy under your rules without firing. Or you may fire and publish that you chose to break your own policy. Vesk said nothing. Ultimatum 000229 pulsed in the corner like a quiet metronome. The bridge smelled of dust, warmed 1 degree past comfortable. A distant fan stuttered and resumed. Somewhere in the belly of Sanction Gao laughed again, and then swore as a medic wrapped his knuckles in cool gel. On the civilian net, a teacher on the Lantern led a quiet recitation name your neighbor name what they carry. Voices named bread pictures seed someone's grandmother's ring, the taste of clean water, the sound of a dog. In that small litany, weight turned back into people. Teaching is a map, compulsion is a collar. Laura Note Quorum said softly, a habit when it sets something in the fleet's permanent memory. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Make it so, Mara said. Lantern of Grey hold. Larkspur breathe. Bellwether quiet those ovens. We will light them again. Praetor Vesk has decided to shorten again, Quorum said, voice flinty now. Ultimatum 000100. He will try to force our hand with scarcity. He is sending a subclause about the convoy's transponder anomalies. Of course he is, Mara murmured. He must show control. We will show consequence. She lifted her chin a fraction. All ships prepare for pivot. Quorum announced the pivot geometry and legal basis on all bands. Imani flood their corridors with the truth of their own flags. Tomas on my mark slide us across the false seam and open a second shadow behind our wake. Open the door, they bolted using their key. Geometry posted quorum said voice like a clean blade. Legal basis mandates published corridor safety policy, Clause 7, Sub 2, prohibits emission within 5 degrees of a designated lane if a civilian hull is within range. Their misaim created such a designation, recording on, Mark Mara said. Sanction moved with a dignity that looked like slowness until you measured it. The convoy ghosted with her tight as a heartbeat. The mandate ring tried to breathe in and found its own ribs in the way. The stealth frigate's sweep ended, but the moment of designation remained 5 long minutes, etched into their doctrine like a bruise. Their corridor is our shield because they said so. Vesk's face tightened by half a degree. This is sophistry, he said at last. You weaponize nuance. Nuance is just accuracy with mercy, Mara replied. You offered a lesson. We answered with one. A tremor ran down the port side as Sanction took a brush of heat from a hurried alignment somewhere in the mandate ranks. Lights steadied, then dimmed, then steadied again. A smell like singed dust curled under the consoles and disappeared. Damage Vance snapped. Cosmetic quorum said. Heat scar along a paint seam. One sailor bruised on a ladder well. He refuses a stretcher. Name Mara asked again. Ortiz. He says the ladder started it. Let them see that cost does not require blood. Admiral Imani said, eyes narrowed at the waveforms. I think they are about to escalate along a different axis. They are pinging the gate admins. They will claim we corrupted a transit license. They will move this from lasers to law. I had hoped they would, Mara said. We are better at law. Praetor Vesk is opening a channel to the gate authority with a recorded charge, Quorum said. He asserts that the sanctioned fleet has falsified corridor beacons. He requests administrative detainment. Send our packet, Mara said. Full recording of Cruiser 9's discharge. The stealth frigate arrival. The Clause 7 subtext. The public tally. And the names of Gao and Ortiz because the ledger keeps names. The tally isn't numbers. It is stories with totals. From the gate, authority came a pause heavier than any beam. Then a reply in the flat voice of a bored professional who had found a spine. Mandate of Harrow. It said your corridor designation is under your control. Your misaim triggered constraint. The convoy transits under their own thrusters. Administrative detainment denied. Quorum let a small warmth into its tone as if it could smile without lips. Ultimatum 0029, it said. Praetor Vesk is either going to fire anyway, or he will invert and pretend this was always his mercy. We prepare for both, Mara said. Tomas keep our shadow tight. Imani prepare the second set piece. System scale, Imani asked without looking away. System scale, Mara confirmed. He opened a single corridor. We open the whole sky. Steady your breath. Widen the frame. Before the pivot to the second set piece, voices rose again, gentler and closer. A steward on sanction set a tray of metal cups near the bridge hatch, each filled with lukewarm tea. A cleaner who never spoke on duty touched the bulkhead twice for luck. On the lantern, someone hummed a working song about plows and rain, oddly cheerful in vacuum. The Larkspur inventoried anesthetics and realized they had enough if no one panicked. On Bellwether, a mechanic named Kira taped a picture of a lighthouse above a panel she hated. A pilot on Skiff 7 texted her sister that she still wore the cat ears keychain and that it was not silly. 2 teenagers who had kissed once in a freight hold decided to do it again when they were safe, and the thought steadied their hands. We are brave in all the quiet ways. Praetor Vesk has set his face, Quorum said. He will choose the inversion. He will claim magnanimity. He is transmitting, you may pass by our mercy. Copy it, Mara said. Publish it with the earlier shots. Published, Quorum said. Then we move to the trap flip, Mara said, voice low, so it would not crack on pride or fear. Imani seed, the high orbits with cold sails. Tomas cut thrust to the convoy by 1% and let the sails catch. Vance start the chant. Vance nodded. His voice rolled through the fleet in a cadence half formal, half prayer. For every gun they raise a rule. For every rule they bend a path. For every path they narrow, widen a witness. For every witness they doubt, show them too. Openings multiply when you share the light. Imani's cold sails, almost invisible sheets, drifted into the higher planes like patient snow. Quorum aligned sensor heads with them. When the mandate tried to shepherd the convoy down the single corridor, the sails caught the faint pressure of gate tides and spread like a fan behind us. The system map changed shape not by force but by geometry. The safe lane was no longer singular. It was a field of possible, each square bounded by the mandate's own prohibitions. Second set piece underway, Quorum said. We are creating an inside-out kill box that perceives itself as sanctuary according to their definitions. Do not say kill box, Mara murmured. Say lesson. Say ledger. Lesson engaged, Quorum said. Ledgers open. Their stealth frigate returned insulted and eager to erase doubt. It nosed along the new field, found nothing it could attack, without violating a policy that Vesk had quoted often enough to lodge in the minds of his own crew. On a mandate bridge somewhere, a junior officer traced the same geometry and felt something that was not obedience. Anchor your enemy to their better self, then pull. Admiral Imani said, throat tight. They are trying a vector that will brush our stern and force an accidental contact. If we twitch, they will edit the footage and bleed sympathy. Then we do not twitch, Mara said. Tomas trim 1/10. Quorum saturate the field with ranges and legal lines. Trimmed, Tomas said, sweating in the cool air. Field saturated, Quorum said, and even its voice felt more electric now. On Sanction's deck, a cable clinked softly as it took a microstrain. The scent of ion sharpened for a heartbeat. The hull hummed as if old bone learned a new step and approved. The open hand hits harder when it never closes. The frigate slipped near and then past its silhouette, broken into gilt by lines we did not draw but made visible. In mandate chatters, Quorum captured 1,000 tiny discomforts that added up to doubt. Vesk hardened his voice to sand down the burrs. Ultimatum expired. Quorum said after a moment that felt like an hour. They have not fired. They have not released a permit on record. They have declared after the fact that this was their mercy. Then we finish printing the truth, Mara said, and we move the convoy. Steady, no triumph. Her palms were cold. She flexed them once, then put them flat on the back of Vance's chair, grounding herself in the steady thrum. She thought of Gao and Ortiz and of the bread and the cat ears and the quiet chant that had gone through their hull. On the lantern of gray, the teacher began another litany, this one of places they would see when they were allowed to be ordinary again. They will claim credit. We will keep record. Admiral Quorum said Praetor Vesk is bringing up reserve patrols from the far arc. This is the third escalation. He will try to box our sails against the outer tide and claim we violated a different subsection. Good, she said, almost smiling. We've been gentle. We can be sharp. The Sanction's hull gave one contented sigh as coolant returned to its calmer route. The bridge lights brightened by a fraction. Quorum began to speak ranges and fuels with a tempo like music. Imani's hands moved faster, then steadier as she found the measure. Prepare the inside out, Mara said, and the ship, the fleet, and the civilians listened to a silence that tasted like metal and patience. Vance lifted 2 fingers toward navigation and then let them fall. The gesture was tiny, but the bridge steadied around it, as if the air itself acknowledged the cue. Quorum drew 3 faint lines across the tactical plot, like chalk marks, each line a possible slipstream through mandate interdiction vectors. Imani's console hissed as a coolant microvalve opened and then closed long enough to keep her board honest. The smell of ion came and went like a tongue of weather. Name the lines before you walk them. Reserve patrols are in a slant approach, Coram said. 6 ships, low-emission discipline. They will try to fold us against the outer tide and claim we self-trapped. They rehearsed that in War College, Vance said. Shame the exam changed. Imani Mara said we turn their fold into a fan. Treat their approach as a comb. Each tooth becomes a safe cell by their policy when your sails cast human silhouettes across their aim zones. I can do that, Imani said, already doing it. I'll strobe sail signatures on a beat that looks like life under their heuristics. Post the schedule fleet-wide, Mara added. We will not move as 12, we will move as 1. Hold your form until their shape fails. Before the patrols bit, the small voices rose one more time to rinse steel with human presence. A grandmother on the lantern told a story about a winter river and 3 stubborn geese that would not leave until a boy cracked the ice with a stick. A deckhand named Pilar unpinned her ribbon and tied it on a bulkhead where others could touch it for luck. A medtech on the Larkspur taught a little boy to count the beeps of a monitor by 2s. On Bellwether, Kira wiped her hands and grinned at the lighthouse picture as if it had winked. A pilot on Skiff 7 leaned her helmet against a porthole and felt the hum come through her skull. In the bakery oven, a loaf cracked and whispered steam. We make room by letting others breathe, Patrol Vector Committed Quorum said. Ranges closing. Heat budget stable. We are still within spare. Open the mirror math, Mara said, and there was no glass in it. Quorum iterate their rules as a moving boundary. Imani flashed the sails on the beat. Tomas underthrust by 3/10 and then freeze your hand. Thomas licked a cracked lip and nodded. 3/10, he said. The reserve patrols took their places like confident teeth. The outer tide pressed just enough to make it look inevitable. Then the sails pulsed and the beats looked like lives, and the mandate's own range gates threw warning amber across their consoles. Every tooth of the comb sprouted small forbidden zones that their doctrine could not ignore without admitting what it was. The box turns inside out when you mark the faces. Praetor Vesk does not like being made to listen to his own book, Quorum observed. He will claim we forged it. Publish the citations as we go, Mara said. Numbers, not opinions. A reserve ship tried to force a mistake by moving on a fractional lag, a dance step often used to make an opponent fill the wrong square. Tomas refused to fill anything. He rode the sanctions mass like a slow idea. The hull hummed its approval, old plates settling on old ribs in a posture that said not yet. Watch his flag, Vance murmured, squinting at the corner tile where Vesk's face sat like a coin. He still thinks every eye belongs to him. They never did, Mara said. They just hadn't been lent elsewhere. Open your scope wider than his story. The reserve patrols scatter, minimize their own signals, but the sails loved light, whether stingy or generous. Each faint brush registered. Each brush drew a thread of prohibition across the plot. In Mandate comms, Quorum picked up the first uncertain cough of a junior's voice asking if Clause 7 still bound them if the field had been distorted by enemy artifice. Answer him, Mara said quietly. Send him his own doctrine with his own admiral's signature at the bottom verbatim. Sent. Quorum confirmed. The junior's micro-expression suggests a person introduced to his own reflection. The sanction vibrated as a vent relieved pressure, a quick hiss that kissed everyone's ears. Imani tapped a key with the heel of her hand and winced. She would ice the bruise later. Tomas's hands hovered above his controls, steady as held rope. The air tasted like hot plastic and coffee that had been ignored too long. The best counterweight is the truth, he printed. Third patrol is rolling, Quorum said. They intend to force a bump between Bellwether and our stern. I see them, Tomas murmured. Bellwether, Mara said on a tight beam. Keep your nose in our shadow. Count the seconds. When I say you will cut thrust entirely for 3 beats. We can do that, Bellwether's pilot said, a young voice that sounded like stubborn light. Tell me when. Now, Mara said. The bellwether slid 1 finger's width inward. Third patrol found itself corrected by its captain's own safety overlay, uncompromising and uncaring about embarrassment. On the patrol bridge, a helmswoman swore into a mic that did not transmit, then smiled like a secret touch, because sometimes rules saved your skin from your story. The map is kind when you let it be. Praetor Vesk is requesting the gate authority open a special proceeding, Quorum said. He will try to force a legal ambush mid-flight. Vance shook his head. He'll paint it as clarification. Clarify, Mara said. Quorum volunteer the recording before he finishes asking. Imani placed 2 sails over the gate's own collision lanes and light them with our registration keys. We will not let his language float free. Imani's hands never stopped. 2 sails set, she said. Gate lanes highlighted. A smell like ozone walked the bridge and left. The console glare sharpened as brightness shifted, then softened, to protect eyes that would be asked to work longer than usual. Keep the hearing public even when nobody gathers. The gate authority did not convene a courtroom. They convened an address. Every hull received it. The message was brief. All lanes remain neutral. Corridor designations are self-binding. Recorders on. The voice yawned a little at the end. Boredom could be a kind of virtue. Vesk is moving to propaganda, Quorum said. He will flood local channels with old footage of pirates to claim equivalence. Let him, Mara said softly. Between fear and arithmetic, arithmetic wins if you pass it around. Some stories shrink when you share the measure. The Reserve Patrol's formation found its own limits and stopped bleeding new constraints. The field froze in a shape mandate could neither attack nor bless without changing the bloated geometry of their pride. The convoy slid across cells like a child stepping on stones in a shallow river. The hull purr deepened, lifting hair on forearms. In the larkspur, the medic counted to 4 for the small boy and let him count back by 2, then by 1, then not at all as boredom beat fear. Vance leaned his weight properly. We'll clear the ring in 6 minutes if no one coughs. Somebody will cough, Mara said. Prepare to listen. Listen harder than you talk when the world heats. The cough came as an electromagnetic brush that made everyone's molars ache. The Mandate's stealth frigate pulsed a new trick, a narrowband denial meant to smear Sanction's sail signatures into nonsense. The sails didn't care. They glowed on the beat, and then slept stubborn as bonds. Reserve Patrol 2 is shadowing our stern, Quorum said. If we sneeze, they will say strike. Then we swallow, Mara murmured. Tomas brace. Imani invert if they throw the narrowband again. Let their own pulse brighten the wrong squares. Imani nodded. If they pulse again, I'll let their denial become their citation. Mara's heart thudded against her suit's chest, lining the fabric of her pressure shell, whispering as it flexed. She could feel her pulse in her cheeks. The recycled air tasted somehow sweet and metallic at once. Turn the shove into a handrail. They pulsed again. The wrong squares brightened beautifully. Reserve 2's safety overlay went red like a scolded cheek. The patrol throttled down and slid outward with exaggerated dignity. On one of their comm loops, the junior who had asked before asked again if their doctrine wanted them to shoot children. Nobody answered him. In the quiet, the question sat like a heavy stone that rebalanced the table. Quorum recalculated times in a voice that kept everyone breathing. 4 minutes to break free. Fuel margins within plan. Heat is happy. The hull is telling me we treated her like a person today, and she is considering forgiving last month. Vance snorted. Tell her we apologize to her paint. Gao says it was his fault for smiling. At a panel, Quorum added a stray kindness, and Mara knew the AI's humor had learned from the people who had grown around it. Pay the costs in names, not just numbers. Praetor Vesk is moving the rhetoric again, Quorum said. He is invoking the phrase necessary exception. He is about to shoot at the idea of us and then apologize to the record. Prepare to accept his apology in advance, Mara said. Vance ready cold on the forward veil. Imani anchor the sailing field with their own beacons. Anchored, Imani said. This will bruise their pride. That is their own bruise, Mara said. We just hold up the mirror, show them their face without smashing the glass. The shot came late and clean and declared itself a warning that carried a burn. It kissed the veil and went elsewhere. Sanction sang a little higher. A console on deck 6 squealed and then died. A petty officer named Mbutu, who had never liked that console, pushed away and misjudged his handhold and slammed a shoulder against a frame rib. He said rude, eloquent things in 3 languages and then lay very still while a friend poked him and called him brave because he did not pass out. Report Vance snapped. Cosmetic and bruised Quorum said. Deck 6 smells like a hairdryer and victory. Mbutu's shoulder will bloom purple, but he will tell that story often. Mara closed her eyes for one breath and then opened them. Publish the apology we wrote for them, she said. Attach the angle of approach and the policy number. Count the lines and write them straight, published Quorum said. Praetor Vesk is rejecting ownership. His jaw twitches. Then we widen the frame, Mara said. This system scale lesson ends when the mandate must choose between shooting their reflection and lowering their gun. Prepare the corridor field flip. Quorum's tone changed a degree toward ceremony. Flip geometry calculated. When we execute the mandate's corridor designation will propagate outward as a safety lattice synchronized with gate tides. For 8 minutes, any discharge into the field will violate 3 of their proudest axioms. Execute the flip when silence is loud enough to hear. Before Mara gave the word, she listened. The bridge's underfloor hum provided a bass note. The overhead fan clicked twice, then did not click again. Someone's suit made a soft cloth rasp as they adjusted a belt. Far aft, a coolant pipe hissed and settled. In the lantern's galley, a knife knocked twice against a cutting board because someone had decided the children could have fruit too. The air in Mara's mouth tasted like old pennies and resolve. Flip, she said. Imani pressed 2 keys at once like a chord. The sails pivoted as if becoming a single thing for a breath, and then 100 things again. Gate tides caught them and carried them in a way that would read like benevolence to any mandate lawyer. The corridor turned into a field, and the field collapsed into an obligation, and the obligation spread until it became the shape of this sky for 8 minutes that would feel like a century to the proud. Their killbox has become a safe house made of their words. Praetor Vesk Quorum reported has stopped blinking. He understands. Reserve patrols are frozen by their overlays. The stealth frigate has powered down its sweep to avoid writing its own indictment. They can only watch. Then let them watch, Mara said. Convoy take the long way on purpose. No flourish, no rush. We will, Lantern replied. We are walking in a museum of rules. It is very quiet. On the larkspur, the small boy repeated the medic's count and then fell asleep. On Bellwether, Kira laughed because the lighthouse looked smug now. On Skiff 7, the pilot touched her keychain and told it that some cats were patient hunters. On Sanction, Mbutu told anyone who would listen that he had fought a rib and lost. The quiet is the sound of a gun set down. 2 minutes to clear, Quorum said. The praetor is preparing a speech. Let him prepare, Mara said. We will bring a better closing argument. New escalation. Imani said suddenly, breath-catching. Mandate is not going to shoot. They are going to cut the lights. Vance frowned. What? They will order their ring to power down fire control transponders and public channels for 90 seconds, Imani said. They will assert safety during the blackout, and then claim that no record exists of anything but their mercy. This is a practiced scrubbing maneuver. They call it the Sabbath. Mara's tongue went dry. Quorum, she said. If they cut their lights, what remains visible? Heat, Quorum said. Heat and inertia, and the count we keep. The dark trick is old. The heat is honest. Prepare the ledger beacons, Mara said. Imani sync them to the sail's last positions. Tomas hold us exactly where our inertia wants us. Vance, no one flinches. No one flinches, Vance said. On Praetor Vesk's tile, the lights dimmed like a theater before a play. Around the ring, mandate cruisers went black in a polite, orderly way that was uglier than blood. Public channels went to tone. For 90 seconds, the mandate intended to own reality. Lights out, Quorum said softly. Recorders alive, heat maps steady, our beacons whispering. The bridge did not go dark. Sanction had seen tricks before. The low consoles put out a comfort of lambent glow. The coolant hissed as if shushing someone who wanted to shout. The suit heartbeat sensor under Mara's left clavicle ticked against her skin, an anchor and a metronome. The ledger writes in the heat of their hiding. For 90 seconds, the fleet mind counted. For 90 seconds, Imani's beacons hummed a tiny truth into the zeros. For 90 seconds, the convoy moved 3 ship lengths, and then 3 more breath by breath, across a space that would later be called mercy in mandate histories if nobody protested. When the lights came back, the world looked the same and felt different. The sails stood where they had been. The field persisted because the laws did. The convoy was provably across. Quorum presented the mandate's 90-second Sabbath like a ledger page on a screen they did not control. Praetor Vesk speaks, Quorum said, voice clinically calm. He calls this a demonstration of mandate restraint. He is attempting to conclude the narrative. Wasapon. Then we conclude the lesson, Mara said. Quorum, send the ledger. Send it to the Gate Authority, the Trade League, and the Mandate Assembly. Include every name we can spell. Write the consequence where every hand can touch it. Quorum sent the packet through 6 channels at once to embarrass any cowardly filter. It contained the first shot and the apology written for them. It contained the flip and the field. It contained the Sabbath's 90 seconds of heat and drift with accurate timestamps. It contained Gao's knuckle and Mbutu's shoulder and the bread and the cat ears. It contained the fleet's lore stamp printed clean as bone. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. There was a pause, and then the Gate Authority did the small, brave administrative thing that makes laws worth writing. Effective immediately, the voice said, ultimatums against civilian assemblies are suspended within 8 AUs of a transit aperture. Corridor designations create binding safety fields. Violations will be tallied publicly with names. The Trade League echoed it with teeth, deny passage to any that declared such clocks. The Mandate Assembly, slower but stung, opened an inquiry that named Vesk and 3 others with him. The precedent lands when the room is full. Praetor Vesk is choosing how to live under a sky where his word is smaller, Quorum said. He will either step down from this ring or he will build a different ring elsewhere and pretend today was a draft. He will leave a bruise, Mara said. We will leave a rule. The convoy passed the last gate marker with what looked like ease and was actually the hardest kind of discipline. Tomas exhaled a breath he had been saving since childhood. Imani leaned back and let the chair take her weight for the first time in an hour. Vance rolled his shoulders like a boxer and then stopped because his back made a noise he didn't think backs should make. The hull thrummed low, a cat purr spread across kilometers. We finished without closing a fist. Admiral Quorum said more gently than any machine had the right to sound. The field will decay in 2 minutes. We can go. I recommend we do before victory grows heavy. Convoy. Mara said, reaching for the transmit, with hands that had steadied a dozen bridges in worse light. You will keep your relative positions for 10 minutes. And then disperse according to plan. Lantern of Gray, you will bake another loaf when your ovens forgive you. Larkspur, you will sleep in shifts. Bellwether, you will show your lighthouse to anyone who asks. Skiff. 7, keep the keychain. Sanction will stay visible on your edge for as long as it makes you brave. A soft chorus of acknowledgments. Some laughed, some cried, some said nothing, and let the quiet speak, because words would have tilted their hearts too much. The recycled air tasted like sweat and metal, and a new page turned very carefully. Count your breaths now that your chest is lighter. Praetor Vesk requested a private channel. Mara let it open and did not grant privacy. The Gate Authority and the Trade League sat in the corner like the quiet friends who had paid for the room. Vesk's face was tired now, not theatrical at all. "You've made enemies," he said without preamble. "We made a record," Mara said. "You could have bled us and won 10 seconds earlier," he said. "We chose to teach," she replied. He glanced down at something on his desk that Coram could not see. His mouth twitched as if a memory had cut a path through a long practice. "Your ledger will follow me," he said. "So will your Sabbath," she said. His eyes flicked up. He hated that word in her mouth. "One day you won't be able to stitch safety from our rules," he said. And it was not a threat, just a possibility. On that day, Mara said, "We will write new rules, or we will fight." And on that day, Vesk asked with a curiosity that could have been human if he had remembered how to be. "Will you still count names?" "Yes," she said, "especially then. Leave the door open when you exit the room." Vesk closed the channel with the kind of neatness that made clerks happy. The Mandate cruisers held their ring for a minute longer than ceremony demanded, and then bowed outward in an old gesture they pretended not to care about. The stealth frigate drifted away with the posture of a person avoiding a mirror. The sails collapsed back into their housings with soft, grateful clicks. "Damage reports," final Coram said. "1 bruise, 1 burn, 3 overworked pumps, 2 blowers that want a holiday. We used 8 sails beyond allowance. I'll send a requisition with a footnote that says we did it with grace." "Approved," Mara said. "Write the footnote yourself. Add a joke." "I cannot promise humor," Coram said. "I will attempt wit." The bridge lights warmed half a notch. The console glare softened, as if the room exhaled. The hum underfoot settled into the register that meant the ship would forgive mistakes in the next hour, if they apologized now. The smell of ion faded behind the comfort of warm metal. "Hold your people longer than your grudges." Vance turned in his chair and looked up at her. "You still think we can keep doing it like this?" he asked quietly. "Teaching first, biting last, until someone makes us do it backward," she said. "And then only for as long as they can keep their hand on the latch." He nodded once. "You got your precedent," he said. "2, really." "It's not mine," she said. "It belongs to the children who count by 2s, and to Gao and Mbutu, and the baker who turned off the oven and then turned it on again." Coram's voice lowered until it felt like a presence more than a sound. "The public ledger is live. The Gate Authority has pinned the new policy for 3 months while they draft the permanent code. The Trade League's sanctions will bite by morning. The Mandate Assembly has voted to suspend ultimatums in transit systems pending inquiry. They are arguing over whether to call it a humane pause or a compliance adjustment." "Call it a beginning," Mara said. "Openings can be first words, not just gaps." They flew. For an hour, they did not speak much. Elisa on the aft watch handed out tea that tasted better than before because the air was grateful. A sailor fixed a squeaky vent with a flick and a grin. Mbutu told his story twice and discovered he was funnier the second time. Imani iced her hand and hissed and then laughed and told Coram if it made a joke in the requisition, she would recommend a firmware update to teach humility. Coram replied that it had archived 6,000 human jokes, and none of them were safe. Bellwether seesawed on her thrusters just long enough to make her lighthouse wobble in the picture, and Kira corrected it with a spare and a muttered apology. The Larkspur ran a quiet drill for a disaster that would not come today because luck preferred people who practiced. The Lantern of Grey cut bread and practiced ordinary. Count normal as a victory, too. The Mandate ring became stars again behind them. The gate's faint hum pressed against sanctioned skin without malice. Ahead, the corridor to the inner system glittered with small traffic, like a city's rear lanes at dawn. Quorum read the ranges in a murmur that let the bridge relax without sleeping. "Admiral," the AI said. After a time, "May I ask a question for my own ledger?" "Yes," Mara said. "Always. When we teach, do we hope the student changes, or do we only hope the audience hears?" "Both," she said. "When we can have both. When we can't, we take the audience. Not because they are more important, but because they are many, and many can be kind to one in the next hour." Quorum absorbed the answer in a way that felt like light resting on a lens. Teaching is slow victory in public. The gate authority pinged them with a bureaucratic kindness. "Be advised," the message said, "that the new policy has generated 1,000 rude letters and 8,000 thanks. We are bracing for more. Please send any additional documentation. We prefer numbers with names attached." "Send them Gao and Mbutu's notes," Mara said. "With permission." "Permission obtained," Quorum said a second later. Gao added a smiley face. Mbutu added too. The air tasted like a room no longer holding its breath. The engine's purr fell into a key that matched the fatigue in Mara's bones without tipping her over. The console edges felt friendlier under her palms. Open hands carry longer than clenched ones. Before they reached the inner beacon, the civilian net flickered with small gifts. Someone sent a picture of the bread's ragged interior. It looked like a map of tides. Someone else sent a recording of children counting and then refusing to count because the bread was ready. Bellwether offered a wistful shot of the lighthouse picture taped above a panel crooked and staunch. Skiff 7 sent a 5-second clip of a tiny cat charm swinging in slow gravity, ridiculous and royal. The Larkspur sent a short video of a medic rubbing a small boy's head with 2 knuckles and grinning. "File them," Mara said, softer than the hum. "Filed," Quorum said. "Would you like a copy on your board?" "Later," she said. When my hands stopped shaking. "Count the shakes. They mean you remembered your heart." They docked at the inner beacon with the grace of a tired dancer. The clamps thudded soft and certain. The suit heartbeat sensor under Mara's collar slowed 2 steps without being told. The forward lens irised down, ending the raw flood to a gentle stream. Vance stood and stretched until his back made that sound again. "You should see a doctor," Mara said mildly. "I will," he said, "after I finish pretending I don't need one." Imani rotated her wrist and hissed, and then smiled at her ice pack as if it had achieved personhood. Tomas rested his forehead against his console for exactly 2 seconds, and then lifted it, breathing out in a way that sounded like gratitude disguised as technique. "Ship-wide," Mara said, and the channel opened like a held breath. "You did your jobs. You chose not to close your hands. We wrote a rule. We kept names. Go eat. Sleep. Send 3 messages you were saving. We will clean the sails in the morning. We will replace the pumps. We will repaint the seam. We will put our feet on another deck with the same patience and the same sharpness until people stop bringing clocks to our doors. Close with care. Open with courage." She did not say more. She would not spoil the quiet that came after, when people heard their own ship finally settle like a house at night. She sat and let her fingers rest on the arm of her chair and watched the little glow of a panel go from bright to dim and back with the slow breath of a machine that had earned its sleep. Later, when the first flood of messages finished and the tea cooled and the smell of ion hid under the smell of old metal and warm fabric and skin, Quorum's final ping arrived with the deliberation of a clerk putting a book on a shelf. "The precedent lock is formally recorded," it said. "Gate Authority Code, Ultimatum Moratorium, Transit Systems. Trade League sanctions affixed. Mandate Assembly Resolution. Ultimatum Doctrine suspended in transit theaters pending review with external auditors. Public ledger counters incremented under witness. The room is larger." "Good," Mara said. "Leave it larger when we go." The compact monologue formed before she knew she was preparing it. She spoke not for the record, but for the hands on the ship and the ones that would hold them tomorrow. We do not win by erasing. We win by measuring, by refusing to be hurried into cruelty, by showing the price of a finger on a trigger and the value of a hand at rest. We will teach until we are forced, and if we are forced, we will finish, and then we will teach again. Mercy without clarity is neglect. Clarity without mercy is a collar. We carry both. We count both. And in the end, someone else breathes easier because we did not flinch. The blockade status lights along the far wall dimmed from warning amber to ordinary white, and the mirror lenses on the forward bay cooled from a glare to a pewter calm. We kept the room open and left the ledger with names,